Good evening and welcome back. You're watching NDTV. I'm Rishika Barua. India is seeing daily spikes of over 30,000 cases of the coronavirus. Over 25,000 lives have been lost to the pandemic so far. This includes doctors and frontline workers. Critical COVID drugs are in short supply and are being black marketed. Remdesivir selling for as high as 50,000 rupees. To make sense of India's COVID-19 crisis, where we stand today, we have with us Dr. Naresh Trehan. He's the chairman and managing director of Medanta. We also have Dr. Rajesh Malhotra. He's the chief of the COVID Facility Trauma Center at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences. Thank you so much for sparing the time of day and being with us here on NDTV. I want to begin by asking you, Dr. Trehan, India seeing over 30,000 cases a day. What explains this sudden spike?
So, it's a shifting pattern. Now, Delhi and Mumbai were the starting. Mumbai actually started first, then Delhi followed very close to it because a large number of people came from overseas, landed here, it spread, the numbers kept rising. And if you see in Delhi, there seems to be a little leveling off and even maybe a little coming off of numbers. But if you look at the rest of the country, you look at the south, you look at Karnataka, you look at Tamil Nadu. Now we are worried about Calcutta, the eastern region. All these things are happening in following a pattern. So what's happened today is what we have seen in the US also. So New York started, and then now it's just shifted to Florida, Texas, to the southern states. So I think that there is a pattern in this virus that how it keeps spreading from one place to the other.
Right.
And the numbers have exponentially gone up. We have crossed 1 million mark, and the death rate, fortunately, still reasonable. So if you look at it on balance, I think what happens is that it rages, people get very careful, they start actually acting very responsibly, and then you see the control coming slowly, it tapers off. Whereas places where there were very few cases, they became very careless. They became nonchalant. And that's how this has spread in those places. This is what one of the reasons is. Now, there may be many unknown reasons also. But what it teaches us today is that you cannot let your guard down. That's the lesson to learn. These numbers will move or whatever will happen. We can break the chain, nobody else can. There is no silver bullet, there's no other cure. We need to actually break this chain ourselves, pretend like we are in lockdown, but function like we are not. I think if we can do that, we will have actually a much better recovery rate, much better lowering rate, and the country can survive this onslaught much stronger and much better.
All right. So each individual has to essentially look out for themselves. I think it's very important advice that you say that we have to behave as if we are still in a lockdown, even though we aren't. That, brings me to my next question, Dr. Malhotra, if I can bring you in. Some studies say in many patients that antibodies don't last for more than 30 days. Does this worry you? Should we be worried? Virus immunity disappearing within months of recovery?
That is true, actually. So, they again emphasizes the fact that we don't know so much about this virus as much as we should be knowing. That has been the whole controversy around even the plasma therapy, because we give plasma when the patient's own antibodies are peaking. And a lot of studies have shown that you have a lot of antibodies going around. So, I mean, if I have to be an optimist, I'll say that there is an interplay between the antibodies as well as the cellular immunity. So it's the cellular immunity which is keeping us going even when the antibodies are going down. But it is a fact, and I do agree, and that also explains a very inconsistent antibody test response in the community which we are doing. I'm still awaiting the results from the ICMR, but whatever we have seen at our center, the results of antibody testing, they have been dismally low. So I don't believe that if 1 or 2% people come as antibody positive among healthcare workers, that is the real incidence of infection among them. Past infection, I don't agree. So I think there is an issue with the antibody levels, like you said.
All right, and I think we'll talk a little more about the antibody test versus the RT-PCR and which should be done how much. But the other big question that many are asking is, of course, fears of community transmission. Dr. Trehan, if you'd like to weigh in here, the Kerala Chief Minister confirmed community transmission in a few areas in Kerala, in a few coastal areas actually. But the government continues to deny that we're not in community transmission stage. Which way would you think we are going? And, do you believe India is in community transmission stage and we should acknowledge it?
I for one have never really understood the definition of community transmission. From what I understand, if you cannot trace the source of where you got infected from, is community transmission. That's one liner that I know. This has been happening for a very long time. I don't know why we have to admit or not admit it's phase 3, phase 4, it doesn't matter. If we are in stage 3, we know that it's spreading like wildfire. We don't have to worry about whether it's stage 3, stage 4. What does it matter? The basic thing is that what do we need to know? The more testing we are doing, the more we are discovering the disease is spreading.
Right.
Fortunately, at the same time, there is the other side to the picture, which says that 85% will be so minor infections, such recoveries will be quite eventless.
Right.
That gives us actually some comfort, of course. But then there is another warning there. One warning is that we are encouraging people by government protocol that if you are mild or asymptomatic, you can go into home isolation. Very good.
Right, but only in certain areas. Certain states are still not permitting that.
No, forget all that. I'm saying they will permit eventually. This is a phase everybody's gone through, and the new places like UP right now is actually considering that right now. They didn't have it, but they didn't have the numbers to worry about it.
Okay.
Right now you do at different phases, you will do it. What I'm trying to say to people, because that's the important thing, the communication to the public. You are in home isolation. You are scared of going to the hospital, that's fine. You should stay in home isolation. But you should always be monitored by one agency or the other, so that when the time comes to go to the hospital, you should go right away and not when you're crashing. Because today, the spectrum of treatments that we have available today, we understand the disease much better than we did 6-8 weeks ago. We have the treatments, we can save many more lives, but the key is that people should arrive in the hospital when they need to arrive in the hospital.
Okay.
Not when their lungs are totally
absolutely. I think that's very crucial advice. That's very crucial advice. You may be scared to go to a hospital, but you have to absolutely go if you need to. But coming back to the question of community transmission, Dr. Malhotra, the reason why it is important to acknowledge that there is community transmission, or at least it is existing in certain areas, is because then policy will be made accordingly or rules will be changed accordingly. Which way do you weigh in? We've had a chief minister of a state acknowledge community transmission in certain areas. We've had doctors in the past say that it happens in hotspot areas. Do you think it's important for India to acknowledge that there is community transmission so that policy can change accordingly? All right, Dr. Malhotra, I believe we're having some audio issues with there. We're going to try and reconnect with you. But Dr. Trehan, the other big question that has dominated the headlines this week and has been very worrying is the IMA issuing a red alert after 99 doctors have died due to the COVID-19. How difficult has this crisis been for doctors?
You're asking this question to me?
Yes.
Okay. So, there are, again, when it hit us, we were totally unprepared. We did not have the adequate protection gear. We didn't understand the disease pattern. Doctors were thrown in the front line, which was supposed to be, and they still are there. So was all the other supporting staff also. And in the early stages, there were many more exposures. and because of lack of any treatment or understanding of the disease, many more people got affected and even didn't survive it. Today, as I said earlier, we have the gear. We must say that Indian industry rose to the occasion. They made enough ventilators, enough PPEs, enough masks, and the protection for doctors also, the protocols became very clear.
Right.
And it took a long time for some of the smaller hospitals to understand where to get the stuff from, how to afford it. All those things are going on still as we speak.
Right.
But overall, the protection and the availability is there. So now, I think that the number of infections that we are seeing in healthcare workers has drastically dropped, at least in areas where there has been experience, where there's enough supply of material to protect them. I think that today we are much better prepared. And I see we should not have many more mortalities in this whole thing, because we can also treat the people. So we have a full spectrum of treatments available according to what stage a person comes to us.
All right.
So we are also understanding that it's not necessary that oxygen level dropping is the only sign. We know that there are people who have prolonged fever. We have done CT scans which show us that the patches appear before the oxygen drops. A large amount of lung is compromised already before oxygenation drops. So if you have a cough and fever, you must go and get examined properly.
Right.
You should not then hesitate to go out. And there is no stigma to having contracted this infection. This is nobody's fault. It is actually unleashed. It's unleashed on us. Wherever it came from China. What the reasons why it started in China?
Let me also bring Dr. Malhotra into the conversation, because I think AIIMS has also reported a lot of doctors who tested positive for the coronavirus. Was there initially a shortage, or is there still questions over the quality of PPE equipment, or has it stabilized? This, of course, is in light of the IMA issuing a red alert for doctors. Dr. Malhotra.
So, right in the beginning, we had constituted a committee for the PPEs, which was very stringently looking at the quality of the PPEs. Okay. Because the trauma center was getting the most severely affected patients, and all those aerosolizing procedures and intubations and ventilator patients were there. We made it a point right from the beginning that, the quality, it was absolutely not negotiable. And we have fortunately not had a shortage. And that's how we could treat over 1,400 patients who were, sick, needing the various amounts of oxygen and ventilation.
How do you respond to the IMA red alert?
No, I think IMA red alert is more about the situation prevailing. But then I think we have, at our institution, maintained high quality control. Wherever we were not happy about what was being supplied, we returned it immediately.
Right.
And it was always a policy that we should have 15 days PPE with us at all times, even before starting.
Okay. Dr. Malhotra, I also want to ask you, you are managing the trauma center, the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, the COVID trauma center. How has shortage of remdesivir impacted the treatment of coronavirus? And I say this as NDTV today brings a report of remdesivir being sold in the black market for as much as 50,000 rupees when the drug costs around 5,000 rupees.
So that has been, I have also heard the stories from many hospitals, but what has happened, what has helped us is actually timely action. And we have modified our procedures. Like normally when a patient is admitted and the drug is not available, you have to do a local purchase. So it is done by name. So what we have done is we have advanced purchased some of the remdesivir, in fact modifying the procedure for acquiring only because when a patient needs it, at that time if it is not available in the market, or it is needed right then and there and you can't acquire it for a couple of days, it will be too late for the patient.
Yes.
So we have been managing with local purchase a procedure which is normally resorted to as a last resort, and then we are also entering a rate contract and which should be through very soon. So I think we have been managing till now reasonably well.
Dr. Trehan, do you want to respond to the black marketing of remdesivir being sold at exorbitant rates? I mean, this is something that really requires urgent attention.
This is actually criminal to profiteer from this kind of situation. which desperately people need some medicine and people are extorting money out of it, is absolutely criminal, and the authorities should take very strict action and immediate action, no question about that. Now, this always happens when demand outstrips supply. Now, fortunately, 4 companies have been licensed to do it, and the first one to hit the market was Hetero.
Yes.
And now we have Cipla also bringing it out, and the other couple of I know one, Jubilant is also on the anvil. Hopefully by the end of the month they will also come out, and I think another company will come out. So hopefully this is short term.
Okay.
But in the short term also, there is a panic, and that panic has 2 reasons. One, remdesivir is to be used at the right time.
Okay.
And if you can't find it at the right time, people will give an arm and a leg to try to get it for their family, for their relatives, friends, right?
Yes.
So that, because you're saying that it's available, but people are extorting money out of it. So they have artificially created some shortage.
Okay.
I think that's where the authorities have to swing into action and bridge this gap till more supplies come.
Well, absolutely. I think that's very critical, especially at this juncture when India is seeing over 30,000 cases, every single day. Dr. Malhotra, there's a specific question for you that's been asked by a viewer on Twitter. What are the basic facilities that are being provided by AIIMS to positive patients after they are detected with COVID-19 and they're admitted to a hospital? And I think this will generally apply to what's the kind of treatment that is being given to patients who are being admitted into the hospital who are testing positive.
So I can tell you, Rishika, that I can even make a claim that no hospital in the country can provide so many facilities to a COVID positive patient, because apart from the treatment for COVID positivity, that the oxygen and the ventilation and everything, we have been doing dialysis, over 140 dialysis in 101 patients, endoscopy. We put in 2 pacemakers in last week among patients. We had over 3 cesarean sections.
Yes.
So if you are COVID positive, you get all treatment for COVID.
Okay.
Plus, if you have any intercurrent illness which needs an MRI or a CT scan or an endoscopy, everything is being provided to the patients in trauma center, which is, I think, something unique, which is to have so many facilities under one roof.
All right. The one big controversy, Dr. Trehan, has been on weekend lockdowns. There's a lot of, people asking questions on the rationale of a weekend lockdown. How does it help?
I for one have not understood it, that these short lockdowns, what they will achieve, I don't know. It's only like I heard in Goa, they did a 3-day lockdown. What was the purpose of it? I don't know really, but there must have been some thought process which has not been shared or in public, or we are not understanding it right now. Is it local, helps them to do some hotspots management, whatever? There must be some reason to it, but I don't know. I would not even hazard a guess.
Okay. So no rationale really, or at least nothing that's publicly known. Dr. Malhotra, what is the T-cell immunity and does it guard you against COVID-19? There have been a lot of questions pertaining to that. I think you touched upon it briefly earlier as well.
Yeah, so I think, and just to go to the previous question before I answer this, I think it is just for people not to let their guard down. It's a reminder that everything is not hunky-dory and you should remember. So I think that way, when during the weekend people tend to go out and feel free and get liberated, that's the sort of reminder. So
So you're allowed to go to work, but you're not allowed to step out for recreational purposes. All right.
Whether it works or not, but it's a reminder. As far as the T-cell immunity is concerned, I personally think that that's what is keeping us going, because we still do believe that there have been not many incidents or any suspicions of reinfections. And with the, like you said, the antibodies going down rapidly, maybe within 1 month, I think what is keeping us going is the T-cell immunity. And I do think, and there are talks about vaccines which are providing dual immunity by the antibodies as well as T cells. So I think T cells is where I'm putting my hopes and money on, thinking that that's what is going to protect us.
All right, very crucial there. Dr. Trehan, timeline for vaccine development, would you hazard a guess, or Where do you think we stand at the moment? India's begun human clinical trials.
So this has been done in all over the world actually.
Yes.
There are different phases of trial. So the lead candidate still is the Cambridge group.
That's right.
Which is now basically they're recruiting for phase 3 right now. And I think they and the Moderna one in US, I mean they were the first to get off the goalpost. So they are actually now advanced in their testing. India has also Bharat Biotech and all that. They have also started testing. But no matter what you say, there are several aspects of a vaccine which should be understood. One is its development. Then, of course, it's the trials that they will show that it is not only safe, but it is providing the immunity from disease and for how long.
Right.
So, and then once it's put out in the market, then you have to do very extensive post-market survey also, which is phase 4, where you have to say, did it cause any side effects when it was used in millions of people? There is always some controversy about vaccine.
Yes.
That it's a foreign protein. So when you're introducing a foreign protein into the body, in very small number of cases, there is a reaction from the body.
Right.
So now what shape it takes is always a worry. So you need to get that comfort. So it is going to get clearance. The vaccines are going to get clearance under the Emergency Act.
Right.
That you can press it. You can go to market earlier than what we used to be, where it used to take 5 to 10 years. Then maybe in 1 year or 2 years, you should be able to get out. So my guess, another 6 to 8 months.
All right, 6 to 8 months. But very interesting, the other question that many are asking is what should be an ideal sample size? We've had Russia that said that they've tested a vaccine on 18, military personnel. They say that it's safe and there have been no side effects. Dr. Malhotra, what's the ideal sample size that guarantees a safe vaccine? Is there such a thing?
I think there is a sample size, but I think for that you will have to actually first do a pilot of people, what commercial are getting, and that will help to decide the other studies. Because now we don't know yet.
All right. I think we are having an audio trouble with you again there. Dr. Trehan, would you like to take that on? Russia tests a vaccine on 18 military candidates, say that it's safe. What's the ideal sample size that guarantees a safe vaccine?
Well, there is a lot of pressure on everybody to try to come out with some data, some expression that we are so advanced and these things don't mean anything. Any country can claim anything. Till the vaccine is out and proven, all these bets are off because many people will show off. I mean, we know in science that, a rat is getting cured of cancer and they say the cancer is cured in the world. I mean, that's not true. And 99% of these things fail.
Right.
So all these claims, I can even maybe...
Is there an ideal sample size? Is there a sample size that will guarantee the world a safe vaccine?
At every stage, there is a sample size, and I just explained to you.
Okay.
Ultimately, it will have to go in billions.
Right.
We need vaccine in the billions.
Right.
So for the sample size, it has to be tested in one place. It has to be multi-center, multinational, because we don't know how our protein will react to somebody else's protein.
Yes. Yes.
Fortunately, India is in a good position. Why? Because we have very extensive vaccine producing facilities in India.
Okay.
We are one of the largest producers of vaccine in India. Once there is enough adequate safety proof and there is adequate proof that it can be protective, we can manufacture and get up to speed very quickly.
All right.
And also the second part is that it won't be expensive because it will be produced by our own people.
Right.
So those are the advantages India has.
Okay.
So I think that we just need to be, optimistic, patient. It must be right. We can't be jumping up and down at any news that comes out of a company.
All right. I think you've done two things for us. One is every vaccine story that one reads, we have some context now to understand how to sort of deal with that news. And secondly, I think you forced us to end today on an optimistic note, which is always good, considering all the news that's going around. We have numbers that are rising. I think that's an optimistic note that you've given us to end on. Thank you so much, Dr. Trehan and Dr. Malhotra, for sparing the time of day to answer our questions. Thanks very much for watching.
Good night.